Some men spend their whole lives trying to fix one mistake. Tom was 67 when he got his chance. Comment 7 if you want to hear if he took it. Good. Here's his story. Thomas Brennan woke at 5:15 on a Tuesday in late September, same as every morning for the past 43 years. Alarm hadn't worked in 6 months, but his body didn't need it anymore. Railroad had taught him that 39 years of early shifts, track maintenance, keeping the trains running through the Adirondacks, no matter what the weather threw at you. He lay there in the dark of his cabin, listening to nothing. Margaret used to fill the silence. Her breathing beside him, the way she'd mumble in her sleep sometimes, talking to people he'd never meet. 3 years gone this October, and the silence still felt wrong. He got up, made coffee in the same pot they'd bought in 1983 at the hardware store in Lake Placid. It was burnt on the bottom, and the handle was cracked, but it still worked. Tom didn't see much point in replacing things that still did their job. The cabin was small, 1 bedroom, main room with kitchen at one end, bathroom he'd added in 91 when Margaret's knees got bad and she couldn't walk to the outhouse anymore. 40 acres of woods around it, bought cheap in 1975 when he got the railroad job. Back then, you could still afford land up here if you were willing to work. He drank his coffee black, standing at the window that looked east toward the ridge. Trees were starting to turn, the maples going orange and red. Margaret had loved fall, made him drive her round just to look at the leaves every October, him complaining the whole time about wasting gas, her ignoring him and pointing out trees like he couldn't see them himself. He'd scattered her ashes out there in those woods, couldn't afford a proper burial plot, and she'd never been much for churches anyway. Just walked into the trees one November morning, spread her ashes near a big old birch she used to talk to on her walks. Felt stupid doing it. Felt necessary. Hadn't been back to that spot since. The cabin was too quiet. Always too quiet now. Tom put on his boots, steel-toed, 30 years old, still good, and his canvas jacket. Morning routine. Check the shed, split some wood, walk the perimeter, check the traps. Didn't need to trap anymore, but it gave him something to do. Mostly caught rabbits. Sometimes sold them to the restaurant down in Indian Lake. $20 here and there. Enough to keep him in coffee and whiskey. He stepped outside. The air was cold, that kind of mountain cold that cuts through you before the sun comes up. He could see his breath. Started toward the shed. That's when he noticed it. The woods were too quiet. Tom had lived up here long enough to know the sounds. Birds waking up, squirrels moving through the branches, the wind in the pines, always something. But this morning there was nothing. No birds calling, no squirrels chattering. Just dead silence, heavy and wrong. He stopped walking, hand on the shed door, listened. Then he heard it. Faint, coming from somewhere up the ridge behind the cabin. A sound that made the hair on his arms stand up. Not quite a scream, not quite animal. Something in between, high and broken and full of pain. Tom stood there for a long minute. Common sense said, go back inside. Curiosity said, go look. Stubbornness, the same trait that had cost him his daughter's respect, said he'd lived here 40 years, and nothing was going to scare him off his own land. He went back inside, got his old Winchester from the gun cabinet, checked, it was loaded. It was, always was. Then he started walking toward the sound. The trail up the ridge was overgrown. He didn't come up here much anymore. Used to, when Margaret was alive. She'd walk up here in the evenings, said she liked watching the sunset from the top. He'd told her it was stupid, walking that far for no reason. Wished now he'd walked with her more. The sound came again. Closer now. That same broken cry, desperate and afraid. Tom moved slower, rifle ready. The underbrush was thick with late summer growth, blackberry brambles catching at his jacket. He pushed through, following the sound. The smell hit him before he saw anything, sweet and sharp at the same time. Honey, and under that, something else. Anger. He could hear it now, a low buzzing that grew louder with every step. He came around a stand of pine and stopped, 20 feet ahead, at the edge of a small clearing. was what was left of a massive beehive. The thing must have been growing for years, built into the hollow of a dead oak. Now it was torn apart, great hunks of comb scattered on the ground, honey dripping everywhere. And the bees, Jesus, thousands of them, swarming in a thick cloud that looked like smoke. In the middle of it all, something was moving. Tom raised the rifle, squinted through the chaos of bees. At first, he thought it was a bear cub, dark fur, about that size. Made sense, young bear, dumb enough to try for the honey, paid the price. But then it turned its head and looked at him. Tom's finger froze on the trigger. The face was wrong, too flat, the eyes too round, too aware. And when it reached out toward him, not paws, not quite hands, but something in between, Tom felt something shift in his chest. It wasn't a bear. He didn't know what the hell it was, but it wasn't a bear. The creature made that sound again, weaker now. Its whole body was covered in welts, swollen and angry. Honey matted the dark fur on its arms and chest. The bees kept stinging it. It was dying. Tom could see that. Whatever it was dying right there in front of him. He lowered the rifle. God damn it, he said to himself. To the woods, to Margaret, wherever she was. God damn it. He propped the rifle against a tree and looked around. Found his old tarp in his pack. He always carried it. Habit from years of working in the weather. Shook it out. The bees swarmed angry around him, but he ignored them. Got stung twice on his neck, once on his hand. Didn't matter. He moved toward the creature. It watched him come. Those eyes, round and dark, and impossibly human, tracked his every movement. But it didn't run. Couldn't, probably. Too weak. Tom threw the tarp over it. The creature made a small sound, something between a whimper and a grunt. He scooped it up, tarp and all, lifting with his legs the way they'd taught him on the railroad. Heavy, heavier than it looked, solid like stone. The bees followed him for 50 feet, and then gave up. By the time he got back to the cabin, Tom's arms were shaking. Not from the weight, from something else. From the weight of the decision he'd just made. Lifting something out of those woods that no one was supposed to see. Inside, he laid it on the old braided rug near the wood stove. Margaret had made that rug. Spent 2 winters on it, braiding old clothes together. Tom had complained it was ugly. She'd told him he had no taste. She'd been right. He pulled back the tarp slowly. The creature was small, maybe 3 feet tall, built compact and dense. Dark fur covered most of its body, but the face was almost bare, just a fine covering like down. The eyes were closed now. Its chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. Welts everywhere, hundreds of them, swollen, angry red beneath the fur. Tom stood there looking at it. 67 years old, worked the railroad most of his life, buried his wife, lost his daughter to his own stubborn pride. And now this, whatever this was. Hell, he muttered. He went to the kitchen, filled a bowl with cool water, found an old towel, came back and knelt beside the creature, started cleaning away the honey. The work was slow. The honey was sticky, mixed with dirt and bits of leaves. Tom worked carefully, dabbing at the fur, wiping away the mess. The creature didn't fight him, just lay there, breathing. Sometimes it whimpered. Sometimes it opened those eyes and watched him. Tom mixed baking soda with water. Margaret had done that once when he'd gotten into poison ivy. Said it took the sting out. He didn't know if it would work on bee stings, but it was all he had. He pressed the paste gently against the welts. The creature flinched but didn't pull away. I know, Tom said quietly. I know it hurts. He didn't know why he was talking to it. Same reason he sometimes talked to Margaret's picture, probably. Talking made the silence less empty. You're a damn fool, he told it. Going after that hive. Should have known better. The creature made a soft sound, almost like it agreed. Tom worked for an hour, cleaning, treating the stings, making sure the creature was breathing steady. When he was done, he covered it with an old wool blanket, the kind Margaret used to wrap herself in when she sat on the porch in the evenings. Then he sat back against the wall, and looked at what he'd brought into his house. It was sleeping now. The breathing had slowed, evened out. In sleep, its face looked almost peaceful, almost childlike. Tom rubbed his eyes. He was tired. The kind of tired that came from making decisions you couldn't unmake. Outside, the sun was coming up. Light filtered through the windows. The birds were calling again. The woods had gone back to normal, but inside the cabin, nothing was normal anymore. Tom got up, made more coffee, stood at the window drinking it, watching the woods, wondering what the hell he'd done. The creature slept through the morning. Tom checked on it every hour, changed the wet cloths on the worst welts, made sure the blanket stayed on. Around noon, it opened its eyes and looked at him. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Tom went to the kitchen. He had some milk in the fridge, not much, some oatmeal in the cupboard. He heated the milk, stirred in the oatmeal, mashed it up until it was almost liquid, brought the bowl back to the creature. It sniffed the bowl, looked at Tom, looked back at the bowl, then it drank. Not all of it, maybe half, but enough. When it was done, it settled back against the blanket and closed its eyes again. Tom took the bowl away, washed it, stood at the sink looking out at the woods. "Margaret," he said to the empty kitchen, "I think I've lost my mind." But he hadn't. He knew he hadn't. He'd seen what he'd seen, brought back what he'd brought back, and now he had to figure out what the hell to do about it. By evening, the creature was sitting up, still weak, still covered in welts, but stronger. It watched Tom move around the cabin, watched him add wood to the stove, watched him open a can of beans for his dinner. Tom ate standing at the counter. The creature watched. "You want some?" Tom asked. It tilted its head. Tom put some beans in a bowl, added some bread broken up in it, brought it over, set it down. The creature sniffed it, picked up a piece of bread, studied it, then ate it. Tom went back to his beans. They ate together in silence. An old man and a creature that shouldn't exist, sharing dinner in a cabin in the Adirondacks. When it was dark, Tom locked the doors, drew the curtains. Habit from living alone, he'd always been careful about security. But tonight it felt different. Tonight he was hiding something. The creature curled up on the rug, still wrapped in Margaret's blanket. Tom sat in his chair, the old recliner that had been his for 20 years. Sat there in the dark, listening to the creature breathe. He should be scared. Should be calling someone. Fish and Game. Maybe. The state police. Someone who dealt with things that didn't make sense. But he wasn't calling anyone, because for the first time in 3 years, the cabin didn't feel empty. Tom woke in the chair at 2 a.m, neck stiff, back aching. The creature was awake too, sitting up on the rug, looking at him. "Can't sleep either?" Tom asked. The creature just watched him. Tom got up slowly, went to the bathroom. When he came back, the creature was still sitting there, still watching. "You got a name?" Tom asked. Felt stupid asking, but the silence needed filling. The creature tilted its head. Tom looked at it, at the dark fur, the compact build, the way it sat so still and patient. "Shadow," he said. Didn't know why. It just seemed right. The creature made a soft sound. Not kite agreement. Not kite disagreement. Just acknowledgement. Tom sat back down in his chair. "Well, Shadow," he said. "Don't know what the hell you are. Don't know why I didn't leave you out there. But you're here now. So I guess we'll figure it out." Shadow kept watching him with those impossible eyes. And outside, beyond the cabin, beyond the ring of light from the windows, something else was watching too. Tom didn't know it yet, didn't feel it yet. But out there in the darkness of the Adirondack woods, 2 massive shapes stood motionless at the tree line, waiting, watching, knowing exactly where their child was. Delivery 2. The next morning, Tom woke to find Shadow standing at the window, small hands pressed against the glass, looking out at the woods. "Get away from there," Tom said, sharper than he meant to. Shadow flinched, stepped back. Those eyes found Tom's face, questioning. Tom softened his voice. "Just, people see you, there'll be trouble. You understand?" Trouble. Shadow tilted its head. Probably didn't understand the words, but something in Tom's tone must have registered because it moved away from the window, back to the corner near the wood stove. Tom got up, bones creaking. 67 felt like 80 most mornings. He made coffee. Shadow watched him, tracking every movement. The way he filled the pot, the way he measured the grounds, the way he stood, waiting for it to brew. When Tom poured himself a cup, Shadow made a soft sound, almost questioning. "You want some?" Tom asked. Shadow just watched. Tom poured a little coffee into a bowl, added milk until it was mostly white. Brought it over. Shadow sniffed it, wrinkled its nose, pushed the bowl away. "Fair enough," Tom said. "Took me 30 years to like it too." He made more oatmeal instead. Shadow ate it slowly, using its fingers to scoop it up. The hands were fascinating 5 fingers like human hands, but thicker, stronger. The nails were dark and hard, almost like claws, but not quite. After breakfast, Tom checked the welts. Most of them had gone down overnight. The swelling was less angry. Shadow's fur was starting to look less matted, more natural. "Healing fast," Tom muttered. "Faster than you should be." Shadow reached out, touched Tom's hand. Just a brief contact. Testing. Tom pulled back instinctively, then felt stupid about it. "Yeah, okay, you're welcome." Shadow made that soft sound again. Learning, Tom realized. The creature was learning what sounds meant what. How humans acted. How to exist in this space between worlds. The days fell into a rhythm. Tom would wake early, make coffee, check the cabin. Shadow would watch him, mimicking his movements. When Tom stirred his coffee, Shadow would move its hand in circles. When Tom stretched his back, Shadow would do the same. It was learning by copying. By the 3rd day, Shadow was walking around the cabin with more confidence. Still careful, still quiet, but exploring. It touched everything. The wood stove, the couch, the old radio Tom never turned on anymore. Margaret's picture on the shelf. Shadow stopped at that picture, stared at it for a long time. "That's my wife," Tom said. "Margaret. She's gone now." Shadow touched the picture frame gently, looked at Tom, back to the picture. Something in its expression shifted, not quite understanding, but recognition of loss, of absence. "Yeah," Tom said quietly. "You get it." That afternoon, Tom was chopping wood behind the cabin. Shadow watched from the window. Tom could see its shape there, backlit by the interior darkness. He kept glancing up, making sure it stayed back from the glass. When he came back inside with an armload of wood, Shadow was sitting at the table, had pulled out a chair, was sitting there like a person would sit. Tom stopped in the doorway. "Where'd you learn that?" Shadow just looked at him. "Been watching me, haven't you? Watching how I sit, how I do things?" Shadow tilted its head. That gesture was becoming familiar. The way it processed information, the way it asked questions without words. Tom stacked the wood by the stove. "You're smart. Too smart. That's going to be a problem." But he didn't know how right he was about that. That night, the dog started acting wrong. Tom didn't have a dog. Hadn't since Margaret died. She'd loved dogs. He'd tolerated them. But his neighbor down the road, Pete Mahoney, had an old coonhound that sometimes wandered up this way. Usually Tom would hear it baying in the distance, tracking something through the woods. Tonight it was barking. Not baying, barking. Sharp, aggressive, scared. Tom went to the window. Couldn't see anything in the dark, but he could hear the dog. It was getting closer. Then suddenly it stopped, just cut off, mid-bark. Tom stood there listening. Shadow had gone very still behind him. Then the dog started again, but different. Not barking now, whimpering, running away. Tom could hear it crashing through the underbrush, heading back the way it came. Fast, desperate. Something spooked it. Tom said to the empty room. Shadow made a low sound, almost like agreement. Tom pulled the curtain closed. Probably a bear, but he didn't believe that. The next morning, Tom found tracks. He'd gone out early to check the woodpile. The ground was soft from rain 2 days ago. Easy to see tracks. And there they were, clear as day. Footprints. Huge ones. Bigger than any bear Tom had ever seen. Bigger than any human. They came from the tree line, circled the cabin, went back into the woods. Tom crouched beside one of the prints. Put his hand next to it. The print was easily twice the size of his hand, and the shape not quite human, not quite animal. 5 toes, a heel, but wrong. All of it wrong. He stood up slowly, looked at the woods, looked back at the cabin. Shadow was at the window again. Watching him, Tom walked back inside. "We got company," he said. Shadow came toward him, made sounds Tom was starting to recognize. Not words, but something. Communication. "Something big was here last night," Tom said. "Walking around the cabin. You know anything about that?" Shadow looked toward the window, then back at Tom. And Tom saw it in those eyes. Recognition, not surprise, not fear. Recognition. "It was looking for you, wasn't it?" Tom said. Shadow didn't answer. Couldn't. But Tom knew he was right. That evening, Tom sat in his chair with the Winchester across his lap. He'd loaded it. Checked it twice. Kept it close. Shadow sat on the floor nearby. Kept glancing at the windows, at the doors, listening. "They're your people, aren't they?" Tom asked. "Your family. Whatever you are, there's more of you out there." Shadow made a soft sound. Sad, Tom thought. Or maybe lonely. Hard to tell. "You get separated," Tom said, working it out as he talked. "Went after that hive. Got stung up. They're looking for you." Shadow nodded. Actually nodded. Tom hadn't taught it that. It had learned that from watching him. "So why are you still here?" Tom asked. "Why haven't you gone back to them?" Shadow looked at him. Just looked. And Tom understood. The creature was scared. Hurt. And Tom had helped. Had brought it inside. Had fed it. Had kept it safe. And now it didn't know what to do. Stay with the strange human who'd shown kindness? Or go back to its own kind? "Hell," Tom muttered. "You're making this complicated." But even as he said it, he knew the real complication was simpler than that. The real complication was that Tom didn't want Shadow to leave. The cabin had been empty for 3 years. Silent, dead, and now it wasn't. Now there was someone here. Something here, a presence that needed him, that watched him, that learned from him. Tom hadn't felt needed in a long time. "Stay or go," he said finally. "Your choice. But if you stay hidden. Nobody can know you're here. You understand?" "Nobody." Shadow nodded again. Tom didn't sleep much that night. Kept the rifle close. Kept the fire going. Every sound from outside made him tense. Wind in the trees. An owl calling. The creek running down the hill behind the cabin. And other sounds. Deeper. Heavier. Things moving in the darkness that were too big to be deer. Too deliberate to be wind. They were out there. Tom knew it. Shadow's family. Watching. Waiting. By the 5th day, Shadow was moving around the cabin like it belonged there. It had figured out how to open the cabinets, how to turn on the sink, how to use the toilet, which had surprised the hell out of Tom. "You're learning too fast," Tom said, watching Shadow carefully fold a towel and put it back on the rack. Margaret had folded towels just like that. Neat, precise. Shadow had watched Tom do it once, and now it was doing it the same way. Shadow looked at him, made a questioning sound. "I mean you're smart," Tom said. "Smarter than anything has a right to be. Makes me wonder what else you can learn." He got an idea, went to the shelf, pulled down an old children's book, one of the few things he'd kept from when his daughter was young, before everything went wrong between them. He opened it to a picture, a dog, pointed at it. "Dog," he said. Shadow looked at the picture, looked at Tom. "Dog," Tom repeated. "That's what it's called. Dog." Shadow's mouth moved, trying to form the shape. What came out wasn't quite right. More like da. But it was trying. Tom flipped the page. "A cat. Cat." Shadow tried again. Ka! Tom felt something tighten in his chest. Recognition, wonder, fear, all mixed together. Jesus, he whispered. You can learn to talk, can't you? Shadow tilted its head. Ka, it said again, clearer this time. Tom closed the book, set it aside, looked at Shadow, really looked at it. At this creature that shouldn't exist. That was learning human words. That was folding towels and using toilets and figuring out how to be more human every day. What are you? Tom asked. Shadow just watched him with those impossible eyes. That night, Tom heard the call. He was half asleep in his chair when it came. A sound from deep in the woods, low and resonant. Not quite a howl, not quite a voice. Something that made the windows rattle. Something that made Tom's bones vibrate. Shadow sat up immediately. Made sounds Tom had never heard before. Urgent. Desperate. The call came again, closer this time. Shadow went to the door, pawed at it, made those sounds again. Louder. Hold on, Tom said. He grabbed his rifle, went to the window, pulled the curtain back just enough to see. The moon was almost full, bright enough to cast shadows. And there, at the edge of the clearing where the yard met the woods, were two shapes. Tom's hands went cold. They were massive, had to be 9, maybe 10 feet tall, broad shoulders, long arms, covered in dark fur that looked black in the moonlight. They stood upright, perfectly still, just watching the cabin. Shadow made that desperate sound again, scratched at the door. That them? Tom asked. His voice came out rough. That your family? Shadow nodded, kept scratching at the door. The two figures didn't move, didn't come closer, just stood there, waiting. Tom's finger found the trigger of the Winchester. Old habits. Railroad had taught him to be ready for anything. But this wasn't anything he'd trained for. They're not attacking, he said quietly, more to himself than Shadow. They're just waiting. Shadow made a different sound now, softer, almost pleading. Tom looked at the figures, looked at Shadow, looked at his rifle. 3 years ago, he'd scattered Margaret's ashes in these woods and come back to an empty cabin, empty life. Just waiting to die. Going through the motions until his heart gave out. Then 5 days ago, he'd pulled something impossible out of a swarm of bees and brought it home. And now he had a choice to make. You want to go to them, Tom said. Shadow looked up at him. Those eyes. Margaret had looked at him like that once, when she was dying, when she'd asked him to call their daughter, and he'd said no, said she'd made her choice when she left, said he wasn't begging. Margaret had died without seeing her daughter again, and Tom had lived with that for 3 years. He looked at Shadow, at the door, at the two massive figures waiting in the moonlight. Not yet, he said quietly. Not like this. Let me think. But Shadow was already pulling at the door, making those sounds, and Tom realized this wasn't his choice to make. He reached for the deadbolt, and that's when everything changed, because one of the figures moved, took a step forward, into the moonlight, and Tom saw its face. Not animal, not human, something between. Ancient, aware, and looking directly at him with eyes that held understanding Tom couldn't begin to fathom. The creature raised one massive hand, not threatening, not aggressive, just waiting. Tom's hand froze on the deadbolt. "Goddamn," he whispered. Shadow made that pleading sound again, and Tom had to decide. Delivery 3. Tom opened the door. The cold night air hit him first. Then the smell earthy, wild, like wet fur and pine, and something else he couldn't name. The two figures hadn't moved. Still standing there at the tree line, watching, Shadow bolted past him, ran across the yard on all fours, faster than Tom had seen it move. The smaller of the two figures, the female, Tom guessed dropped to one knee. Shadow ran straight into her arms. Tom stood in the doorway, rifle lowered but still in his hands, watching. The female gathered Shadow close. Tom could hear sounds from her. Low, rhythmic, not quite humming, not quite words, but something. Communication, comfort, She was checking Shadow over, running her massive hands through its fur, inspecting the fading welts, making sure it was whole. Shadow was making sounds too, high-pitched, rapid, like a child explaining what happened, where it had been, who had helped. The male, the father, had to be stood back, watching Tom. Those eyes caught the moonlight, reflected it back silver. Intelligent eyes, assessing eyes, eyes that measured and judged. Tom met that gaze, didn't look away, didn't raise the rifle, just stood there. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just two fathers staring at each other across impossible distance. One human, one not. Both understanding something about protection, about responsibility, about the weight of keeping something safe. Then the female stood, Shadow still in her arms. She turned toward her mate, started to step back into the darkness. But the male didn't move, kept watching Tom. Tom's hands tightened on the rifle. "Go on," he said quietly. "Take your kid and go. We're done here." The male tilted its head. That same gesture Shadow made. Processing. Deciding. Then it did something Tom didn't expect. It moved closer. Tom's breath caught. Every instinct said raise the rifle. Every rational thought said get back inside. Every survival mechanism he had screamed danger. But he stood still. The creature came within 10 feet. Stopped. Up close, it was massive. Had to be 9.5 feet tall. Shoulders broad as a door. Arms that could tear a man apart without effort. The fur was dark brown, almost black. The face was broad, with a heavy brow and a jaw that suggested power. But the eyes were gentle, sad, even. It looked at Tom, at the cabin behind him, at the rifle in his hands. Then it made a sound, deep, resonant, but not threatening, almost like gratitude. Tom swallowed hard. Didn't do much, he said. Voice rough, just couldn't leave it there to die. The creature's eyes stayed on his face, reading him somehow, understanding more than it should. Then it did something that made Tom's chest tighten. It reached into the thick fur at its side, pulled something free, extended its massive hand toward Tom. Tom looked at what it held, a small bundle, wrapped in what looked like woven bark, tied with vine. Tom started. The creature pushed it forward, insistent. Tom set the rifle against the doorframe, reached out, took the bundle. It was light, almost nothing. He unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a stone, smooth, river-rounded, but with markings carved into it, symbols Tom didn't recognize. Old, ancient, maybe, and next to it, a single feather, long and brown and perfect. Tom looked up. I can't. But the creature was already backing away. It turned, went to its mate and child. The three of them stood there for one more moment. Shadow looked back at Tom, raised one small hand. Tom raised his hand too. Stay safe, he said, barely a whisper. Then they were gone, melted into the shadows between the trees. Tom stood there for 5 full minutes, watching the darkness, listening to the silence. Finally, he went back inside, closed the door, locked it, set the rifle down, stood in his empty cabin holding a stone and a feather and trying to understand what had just happened. The next morning felt wrong. Too quiet, too empty. Shadow's spot by the wood stove sat vacant. The bowl Tom had used for its oatmeal was still on the counter. The children's book was still open to the page with the cat. Tom made coffee, stood at the window. The tracks from last night were still there. Huge prints in the soft earth, leading to the cabin, leading away. He'd kept something safe, given it back, done the right thing. So why did it feel like loss? He spent the day trying to keep busy. Chopped wood he didn't need, checked traps that were empty, walked the property line, but his mind kept going back to the night before, to Shadow's small hand waving goodbye, to the male creature's eyes, to that strange gift. That evening, he sat in his chair. The stone and feather were on the table beside him. He picked up the stone, ran his thumb over the carved symbols. They meant something. Some kind of story, maybe. Or promise. Or thank you. He didn't know. Would probably never know. The phone rang. Tom stared at it. The phone almost never rang. Pete Mahoney sometimes, checking if Tom was still alive. The railroad pension office once a year. Nobody else. Margaret's family had stopped calling years ago. His daughter hadn't called in 8 years. He got up, answered it. Dad? Tom's hand tightened on the receiver. That voice, he knew that voice, would know it anywhere, even though he hadn't heard it in 8 years. Rachel? His voice came out hoarse. Yeah, a pause. It's me. Tom sat down hard in the chair. How did you? Why are you? I know it's been a long time. Another pause. Mom died 3 years ago this month. I was thinking about her. About you. About everything. Tom closed his eyes. Yeah, I've been wanting to call for a while now. Couldn't work up the nerve. Kept picking up the phone and putting it down. But tonight I don't know. Felt like maybe I should stop being stubborn. Takes after her old man, Tom said quietly. A soft laugh on the other end, almost crying. Yeah, I do. They were both quiet for a moment. 8 years of silence sitting between them. 8 years of pride and hurt, and things unsaid. I'm sorry, Rachel said finally. For leaving. For the things I said. For not coming back when Mom was sick. I'm sorry, Dad. Tom looked at the stone in his hand, at the symbols carved there, at the gift from something that should have killed him but had recognized kindness instead. He thought about Margaret, about Shadow, about all the chances he'd had to do the right thing and how many times he'd chosen pride instead. I'm sorry too, he said. I was wrong, about a lot of things, about you leaving, about not calling you when your mom was dying, about being too damn stubborn to admit when I was wrong. Rachel made a sound. Definitely crying now. Yeah? Yeah. Tom's voice cracked. I'm an old fool, Rachel. But I'm trying not to be anymore. Can I come see you? She asked. Maybe next month? I've got some time off work. Could drive up, stay a few days if you'd have me. Tom looked around the cabin, at the empty spot by the wood stove, at Margaret's picture, at the life he'd built out of silence and solitude. I'd like that, he said. I'd like that a lot. They talked for another 20 minutes. Careful at first, then easier. Rachel told him about her job in Albany, about the apartment she'd bought, about a man she was seeing. Tom listened, really listened, asked questions, didn't judge. When they hung up, Tom sat in his chair for a long time. The stone was still in his hand, the feather beside it. He thought about Shadow running into its mother's arms, about the male creature's eyes grateful, respectful, about family recognizing family, even across impossible distance, about second chances. The cabin was still empty, but it didn't feel as empty as it had a week ago. Didn't feel as much like a tomb. There was a visit coming, his daughter coming home, a chance to fix what he'd broken, a chance to be less of a fool. Tom got up, went to the shelf, picked up Margaret's picture. I'm trying, he told her. Don't know if I'm doing it right, but I'm trying. He set the picture back down, looked at the stone and feather, at the gifts from the impossible. Then he went to the kitchen, started making a list of things he'd need to do before Rachel came. Clean the cabin properly, fix the loose step on the porch. Maybe get some of those scented candles women liked. Make the place less like a hermit's cave and more like somewhere a daughter might want to visit. The work ahead felt good, purposeful, like maybe there was something worth living for beyond, just not being dead yet. Outside, the Adirondack night settled over the mountains. The woods were full of their usual sounds now. Owls, wind, the creek running down the hill. Normal sounds, safe sounds. But deeper in those woods, where the old paths led and the moonlight didn't reach, other sounds echoed. Calls and responses between creatures that didn't exist. Families moving through the darkness. Children learning to walk. Parents teaching them to survive. And in one small family group, A young one looked back toward the distant light of a cabin, remembered the old human who'd cleaned its wounds and fed it oatmeal and taught it the word for cat, remembered kindness from an unexpected source. The young one's mother made a soft sound. Time to move on. Time to go deeper into the mountains where humans rarely went. The young one followed, but it remembered. And in the cabin, Tom washed his coffee cup, added wood to the stove, locked the doors. Did all the small rituals of a life continuing, a life that had found meaning again in the strangest possible way. He went to bed that night with the stone on his nightstand, next to Margaret's picture, next to the phone that had finally rung with the voice he needed to hear. And for the first time in 3 years, Tom Brennan felt like maybe his heart would keep beating for a while longer after all. Not because the doctor had changed his mind, but because Tom finally had a reason to make those extra years count. 3 weeks later, Rachel's car pulled up the drive. Tom watched from the porch, saw her get out, saw her look around at the woods, at the cabin, at all the places she'd grown up and then left behind. She looked older, different. But when she smiled, nervous and uncertain and hopeful, she looked like the daughter he remembered. "Hey, Dad," she said. "Hey, kiddo," Tom said. They stood there for a moment, awkward, both trying to figure out how to bridge 8 years in a single step. Then Rachel came forward, hugged him, and Tom hugged her back, holding on tight to something he'd thought he'd lost forever. "I'm glad you called," he said. "I'm glad you answered," she said. They went inside. Tom showed her around, apologized for the state of things. Rachel laughed and said it looked exactly like she remembered. They had coffee at the table, talked about small things, easy things, both avoiding the hard conversations they'd need to have eventually. That night, after dinner, Rachel saw the stone on the shelf, picked it up. "What's this?" she asked. Tom thought about lying, about saying it was just something he'd found, but he was trying to be less of a fool, trying to be honest. "Gift from a friend," he said. Rachel turned it over, looked at the symbols. "Weird friend. You don't know the half of it," Tom said. She smiled, set the stone down, and Tom realized she didn't need to know. Some things were his to carry, his to remember, his to understand in whatever way he could. The week went by too fast. Rachel helped him fix things around the cabin. They hiked the old trails. She told him about her life. He listened, really listened. They talked about Margaret carefully at first, then easier. They talked about the mistakes they'd both made. They didn't fix everything. Some wounds ran too deep for one visit, but they made a start. On her last night, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. Margaret's sunset, the one she'd loved. "You going to be okay up here alone?" Rachel asked. "Yeah," Tom said. And he meant it. "I've got things to do, projects, life. Maybe you could come back at Christmas, or I could come down to Albany, see this apartment you're always talking about." Rachel looked at him. "You'd do that? Come visit me?" "If you'd have me," Tom said. "I'd like that," she said quietly. They sat in comfortable silence. The woods darkened, stars came out, and somewhere far out there, beyond the reach of human sight, other eyes watched the stars too. Other families sat together. Other lives continued in the space between known and unknown. Tom thought about Shadow, about those small hands waving goodbye, about the gift of stone and feather that meant more than he'd ever fully understand. He'd kept something safe for a few days, given it back to where it belonged, and somehow, in the process, had found his own way back to what he'd lost. Second chances. They came in strange forms, from strange places. But they came, if you were willing to open the door when they knocked. Rachel left the next morning, promised to call, promised to come back. Tom believed her. He stood in the driveway waving until her car disappeared down the mountain road. Then he went back inside, back to his cabin, back to his life. But it wasn't the same life he'd been living before. It was something different now, something with possibility in it, something with future. He made coffee, stood at the window, looked at the woods. "Thanks," he said to whatever might be listening. to Margaret, to Shadow, to the universe that had given him one more chance to get things right. Then he sat down at the table with his coffee and Margaret's old cookbook and started planning what he'd make for Christmas dinner. When Rachel came home, that's Tom's story. For everyone who commented 7 at the start, appreciate you riding along. More next Friday.